Greg and Jane Hamilton Parker are the world's most psychic couple. Can they speak to the dead and bring messages of hope in these troubled times? Join them for an evening of mystical talks, world predictions, and spirit messages.
Hi everyone, and today we're doing a talk with the patrons, and we do these regularly, fairly regularly, and I'm gonna tell you a few things first, and then we're gonna take some questions from the patrons towards the end of the video. So first of all, I know everybody likes predictions and things like that. And there's been a few last time on the, I was looking it up on the last video we did, which was in April rather, we're in May now. We're doing this on May the 12th, I think today is. In the April video, I talked about some strikes on Israel. You remember I spoke about that there would be a potential airstrike with Israel, and I quoted that it would be with Iran. Well, actually, perhaps I saw it partly, but there's obviously this week, the whole news on our news here in the UK anyway, has been dominated quite a lot by the airstrikes that Israel have having with Hamas and the terrible things going on there. Now, I lived in Israel for a while, so I kind of have a feeling about that country. And we haven't had a real conflict with Israel happening since about 2014. The last sort of real bad problems with Hamas and the rest were happening, and here it is, it's all blowing up just as we were picking up. And when I saw the at the Wailing Wall there, now the Wailing Wall is the wall to the old temple of the old Jewish temple that used to stand there, which now of course on top of it is the Dome of the Rock and the other mosque. And the people were jumping up and down when they saw smoke coming up from the Dome of the Rock, or near the Dome of the Rock. Actually, it was a tree that was on fire. But there was such worrying enthusiasm in the crowd there. And it was making my mind flick to these feelings that I was having before about these predictions with Israel. And I just do get the feeling that tensions there are going to get worse and worse. And we're going to see a lot more troubles there in Israel. And I think Israel will actually do a strike on Iran out of this, because it's going to be like, I get the feeling there's going to be like, it's going to escalate. Iran's going to start sticking its nose in. And I think that I get the sense that what's going to happen is they're going to have a go at striking those nuclear facilities there in Iran. It's like we're going to use this as an excuse to open up. I mean, it sounds like it was Hamas that started the fight here in Israel, but who knows what goes on in these places. And there are a lot of biblical sort of predictions about the idea that when the temple, the Jewish temple, is rebuilt, those are the days of the end days, as it were. Now, I don't believe that, but I do think one day there will be a rebuilding of the Jewish temple and possibly soon, possibly coming in the next year, perhaps, some major attacks on the Dome of the Rock. I feel as if there's going to be like a terrorist attack on the Dome of the Rock, and it might be severely damaged or even destroyed. That's the one with the big golden dome on top that you will see in the classic pictures of Israel. I've been there. It's a fantastic, fascinating place, and you can go right down underneath it. You go right underneath the Dome of the Rock, and I was taken down there to look underneath the dome, where there's this big black rock, which is a meteorite, which according to the Islamic people, that's how the prophet came down from the sky. You know, so there's all sorts of, and also it's supposed to be the place where Abraham sacrificed his son. You know, so a fascinating, very, very holy place, but had eerie feelings then. And I remember I also said earlier on about predictions earlier in the year that I felt that this year is going to be a time that as we come out of the pandemic, there's going to be a lot of pent up energy that's going to open up old wounds And we're already starting to see what I was talking about there, particularly with the, like we're saying, like of Israel now, but also here in Northern Ireland, we've got problems opening up. And I just feel like all the old grudges are all going to start sort of emerging all at the same time, as if they got renewed energy from the frustration that everybody's got of having to been held back for such a long time with the pandemic. Now, I'm going to also just give a few answers to some of the things that some of the patrons have put on the comments. So those that can't make this live video, where we can chat with me in a moment, but I've also, the patrons are allowed to put comments in the patron section, and I'll answer as many as I can. So there's been a few interesting ones which might make interesting topics for those of you that are with me now live. Some people, one or two mentioned about Trump launching his social media channel. I did also talk about that actually right back again, that he'd be opening up Trump TV, which then sort of went in the news as Trump TV. It doesn't look like that's happening at the moment, but I think we're going to see a lot of news about that very shortly. And quite a lot of people switching over to, away from Facebook and things like that. In fact, we're already seeing quite a lot of problems with Facebook and starting to talk about making sure that kids are not subjected to things they shouldn't be subjected to on Facebook. So I think we're going to see major changes to Facebook over this coming year. But anyway, I might talk about that another time. But people were asking mainly, we had one question. I won't put the names of who said this, but one was, I'm mainly worried about the coronavirus in India. Can you give us an indication of when we can expect some relief? Now, I think if anybody can give any money to India, do it, because India really is in a lot of serious trouble at the moment. I have friends in India, and one of my friends was saying that he's never seen so many beggars on the street, because so many people have lost their homes, have been are in financial trouble, have been migrating from place to place. I don't think we get the full news footage here in the West. So I think it's going to last a long time yet in India. I see about another year of it in India before we really start to see the problem being completely subdued. The north of India, the Nadi said, would be worse affected than the south, and it does seem to be the case. However, very optimistic here in the West at the moment with the vaccines beginning to work, and those vaccines are going to be given to India. I think is going to be one of the top of the list, even above Brazil, of a country that's going to start to benefit, particularly from the AstraZeneca. Of course, India makes it, makes huge quantities of it. So let's hope some of that can be given to its own people rather than exported, which does seem terribly sad for that to happen in my opinion. But of course, all the celebrities are jumping on this idea, we must vaccinate the world, and I'm not going to be one of those that sort of jumps on and starts trying to sort of get glory out of saying something, stating something obvious. But I do feel that it's going to be about another year before we start to see India recovering, so it's going to be a tough time. So I think India needs as much help from the West and all the rich countries of the world as much as it can, because it's got a lot to go through yet. But it will come out of it in the end. And I think that when the moves start to come in, I say about a year, but I think we will start to see fairly rapid change quite quickly too, because I also sense that in India, there's going to be a huge effort internationally announced soon to help India. And so I think we might, get over the worst of it, all the main suffering, a bit quicker than expected. So some of the other questions that people were asking, you remember I gave away my book for example, book of my new book, Your Secret Dream Meanings. I had to remember the title for a minute. What was interesting, some of the comments on the book were interesting, and thank you for those of you that went and put some comments on Amazon for me. That's very kind of you. But might be an interesting topic we could pick up on sometime, because one person asked, you said Aristotle argues that dreams are in fact fragments of recollections from events of the day, and he was interested in some of the things I was talking about with the early beliefs in dreams, and he was talking here about do animals dream, And he reckons his dog definitely dreams, because he looks as if he's running in his sleep and often barking, and thinks the cat is chasing birds in their sleep. And I think that's quite an interesting topic. And that's just a comment that somebody made there, that do our dreams in fact reflect parts of our own days? And I think dreams, a large part of what dreams do is definitely connected with assimilating information from the daytime. But also dreams sometimes bring up memories and thoughts and feelings and predictions as well. So Aristotle had part of the answer there, but there's much, much more. And we could perhaps do a one of these Patron ones one week just on dreams, if any of you like to. And another question that came up, which they asked me to ask, actually, which is interesting. Will the celebrity culture be over one day? and also the comment really was, well, perhaps people in the future will look back at this as if we're a load of idiots, and almost with amazement at just how puerile we can allow our culture to become. And I don't think it's going to happen for a while, but media is changing a lot, actually. And I think one of the nice things is that the celebrities thing is being kind of spread out a bit. So even little guys like me get a little bit of kudos from the fact that we're communicating to our own little niche audiences. And often celebrities are kind of thrust upon us, aren't they? We all see the same old actors and actresses, and we see the same old names coming up. And they're not necessarily always very good at what they do. And I think the world will change, and that we may start, hopefully, to see celebrity being something more connected with the idea of character, of personality, of I mean character in terms of goodness, not character in terms of acting, you know, like the old-fashioned idea of character, people of good character. And I do feel that as we move away from the ages of Kali Yuga, that we will start to have people of good quality as being our heroes, rather than people who are just shallow, greedy idiots, you know. So I think there will be, and I think people in the future will look back at these times and see the broadcasts that were made and be absolutely shocked and horrified at what we took as culture, just as we look back at Rome and see the gladiators and the terrible things done in the Colosseums and things like this. I mean, we look back that with horror, but that was the normal thing in those days. You know, so yes. So in answer to that, yes, we will. People in the future, and perhaps even space people that are seeing the transmissions coming off from the Earth, may look at Earth and think, "I'm not going there. It looks awful," you know. So okay, and someone also picked up on the points that I'd mentioned about that. I felt that there was going to be a lot of geological activity. And I commented and said, well, it's not linked between global warming and earthquakes and volcanoes are separate things. They don't link together. But in my opinion, I said that I felt that they were somehow. Well, someone picked up on my feeling or my thoughts here and said, I've recently been watching research on the theory of grand solar minimum. It started this winter. The effects of grand solar minimum seem to be an increase in seismic activities through something called proton density. Well, I've never heard of that before. So perhaps my feelings about the connection between global warming and more seismic activity does seem to be happening, because I think we're going to get a lot more of that. Whether we get that in the next month or so, but I certainly think in the coming month ahead, you know, are we going to start seeing some of the things I was talking about in the problems in Israel and the Middle East, and again, I think Iran being drawn into it. So that's my thoughts for the start. So now I'm going to take some of the any questions from the patrons, and you have to move from the screen a little bit so I can turn on the patron people. I'll unmute you all, guys.
Kick off. Is it okay?
Certainly. Yep.
Okay. Before I ask my question, I just wanted to say I had a fabulous reading with you. Absolutely fabulous. And a couple of things you picked up. My son, he was over the moon. My husband was over the moon. So thank you. It was fabulous. Really
Oh,
brilliant.
that's
Just
really
want
nice of you.
to give my own promotion there, but it was brilliant. It was
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
How you knew it,
So
God knows.
it went well, Sheila. I remember doing it for you. It was on the phone, wasn't it? We did it, and
Yeah.
when someone's open like you are, really. Now, someone is, but not open stupid, but open, to the idea that these things are possible, and they've got a need, and there's something, you're doing it with good heart. A flow comes, and it's lovely. So thank you for that. And I remember it, and I did enjoy working with you. It was lovely.
Brilliant, thank you. The question that I want to ask is, recently in India, we've been getting articles in newspapers about how China created this biological warfare, which I know you picked up in much earlier readings, which you put on YouTube. And these are very good papers that it's been published in. So, what we have here called India Today. And it seems that this has been pre-planned, or a pandemic, from 5 years back. 5 years. And this Chinese scientist, she had indicated that definitely it was not something from a wet market in Wuhan, through bats or whatever, but it had been created. I just wondered, what were your thoughts on that? And when is China going to fall? I know you predicted it. I mean, the Chinese government, I must make it clear here that the people are great, but, the government. When do you think it's going to fall?
Okay.
When can we start?
Okay. Okay. So a lot of interesting thoughts there, actually, Sheila. I've always had a bit of a sort of a thing with China, actually, because I felt that it has. I think these thoughts are correct. I think that China has been planning these type of germ type of warfare for a long way back, and 5 years would seem about right. The Nadi seems to suggest that in time it would be kind of revealed and found out exactly what went on, but it's going to take us a long time because there's been so many cover-ups with this that it's horrifying, the sheer amount of cover-ups that have happened. And you only need to look at China. I mean, I've been reading some really nice books at the moment about Taoism and what modern Taoism and Buddhism in China. And basically, the Chinese have they've torn down 2/3 of the temples in China, and the rest of them they've made into things they made, particularly during the Cultural Revolution. Not so much now, but they made them into factories. They made them into military bases. They made them into police stations. They turned the whole spirit of China upside down, and even the nuclear bunkers were built under sacred sites. And I mean, you're from India, Sheila, and you know how important sacred land is, sacred spaces to all things, and I feel that something evil's been going on in China for a long, long time. I think they had both the virus, and they would have also the antidote. Now, I don't think it was released deliberately, though it could have been. I think it was accidentally released, and they had to panic and scramble to try to contain it. And it makes me wonder if they already had the virus there, but they thought, well, we can't prove it at the moment. We have to let it spread a bit, and it got out of hand. And when we look at it, we don't hear of millions dying in China, do we?
Exactly.
I mean, China is worse than India for population density, isn't it? I mean, millions of people crammed into cities, and yet they haven't had the sort of spread that we've had in the West, or in India, or in Brazil, or other highly populated areas. So I think that I think there is a lot more behind this than just newspaper headlines. I do feel that there is some. I felt that right the way from the start, and it was about. I first made my predictions about this pandemic starting a while back. A few years back, I started talking about there'd be a pandemic, going to be a pandemic, So maybe I was picking up on that early on, and then it finally hit the stage. later. And the problem is with these pandemics is, you know, we've had a mild one because it doesn't kill everybody. But you imagine if we had if we had an Ebola level of pandemic that was airborne, we'd be seeing far worse problems than was when the Spanish flu was here and things. So that's, you asked me something else too, didn't you?
Yeah, I was asking that when would you see
the fall of China,
the decline of the Chinese government, roughly?
Yeah, because like you say, Sheila, we're not worried about the Chinese people. They're people like the rest of us. I mean, poor people in Hong Kong are Chinese, and Taiwan and are Chinese as well in a way. There's such there's not the people, but the timing is the hardest part when you start to see things ahead. I really have Jane gave a reading to the family of Sun Yat-sen, who is many Westerners don't know about Sun Yat-sen, but Sun Yat-sen was one of the great modern fathers of China. He had a vision of China, which is taken up in Taiwan quite a lot, a vision of China as a democracy. He went to America, he lived in Hawaii, and he had this vision of democracy. And when the grandfather came through, there seemed to be indications. I wasn't there. This was Jane was doing these messages, and most of these were private messages mainly. But the general feeling was that China is going to be saved from this dreadful blight of communism, because that's what it basically is. Still communism in a different guise. You know, it's just as bad as Stalin, but they're just hidden. They're just behind a mask. But it would be saved, and when it will happen, I had the feeling it's not going to be that far. I felt that the Hong Kong revolution, as it were, almost became enough to spark it all off. And Chinese troops didn't go in and quash it at that point. They held it in check. And conveniently, the pandemic came along. And I think that the pandemic may have been triggered to clamp down on Hong Kong. You know, I think you kill a few of our population in Weihua, and I pronounced it wrong, but that would give us an excuse to clamp down Hong Kong, and people would be scared to go out for other reasons rather than authority. So who knows if I'm right with that, but that's my feeling. I felt as if something happened there. But I think it will happen again, and I think Hong Kong could be the part of the spark. But in my prediction some years ago, I said that I felt something would happen in somewhere like Mongolia. Now, we do have all the Ouija people thing that's come up, which I don't know if that's in that kind of area, but I said it would come from an unusual part of China. So that is in some respects a trigger for the West to interfere. But so I think it will arise. I think there's a tension there ready to burst. And like I said, all around the world at the moment, we've got a held back tension. And I think we're also going to get a lot more trade wars with China. We're going to start thinking about these factories that have been filled with children making products for richer children in other countries, and all the pollution that's chucked out from China and the rest of it, and all the abuse of the landscape and the destruction that's caused in so many levels with the Chinese system. And we're going to have to start saying we're going to have to put import taxes on these things. You know, why should you get away with making it without having all the safeguards in place? I think there's going to be a lot more move to do that, and that will see China's economy drop. And when you see the drop in the economy, and if you particularly see food shortages, you normally start to see riots from the people and uprisings. So 2-3 years max.
Brilliant. They're just despicable. When the Indians couldn't even cremate, because as you know, I live very close near Delhi. Cremations, you must be seeing it on BBC News, are taking place in the roads and, nearby the hospitals, because there's so many. And China were ridiculing it. The Chinese government on national television, this is a fact, they were ridiculing and saying that we set fires like this, but the Indian people set fires like this. So I believe I feel very strongly, I believe in karma, and what you sow will get back.
Good God, that's news to me. I've not seen that. See, we don't get all the full reports. We get such a sanitized news in the West.
No, I get everything.
Yeah.
I get everything. I have certain procedures where I can see international news, BBC News, Indian news, and from good sources. And China, my husband is a partner of his own law firm. And what they do, China is so clever. You're talking about the economic issues that they try to get involved in. What they've done, and I've heard this from Italian lawyers as well, they create clauses in their contracts with global entities. If those global entities backfire and choose not to get involved in global Chinese economic policy, there is a clause that says we will take back everything with horrendous interest. And this is see how clever they are. So I was saying to my husband that having lived in England for a long time, I've always sort of been thinking about the Nazis and what the Nazi Germany did. Having been of Indian origin, I'm aware of partition. And I never thought in my lifetime I would have such a bad feeling towards a government. And now I don't think ever in my lifetime I'll forget what China did and how they ridiculed the Indian people when they were being cremated. Imagine.
Yeah, and look at what China did to Tibet. I mean, that's something that everybody's ignored.
Perfect.
I mean, I wrote a book called I can't even remember the name of it now. Anyway, I wrote a book about Tibet. I was asked to write a book about Tibet. So I kind of took the book on a bit reluctantly, really. I thought, okay, but I'm interested in Tibetan Buddhism. So I wrote and then I started doing the research. This is in the 90s. And I was absolutely horrified. The news stories that I was turning up that people were not hearing about. And the wanton destruction of all those beautiful Tibetan holy places and the pollution of the beautiful pristine landscape and tearing down the forest. I mean, that alone, let alone the suffering of the people, it was absolutely appalling. The torture they were doing to the monks and the nuns in the Buddhist thing I won't even begin to describe them. They were sickening beyond belief. And it's just how can we trade with a country like that? You know, I mean, what does it say about all of us buying Chinese?
Why aren't we all going back to China? Because this is a Holocaust. You know, this is a war, actually. To me, this is a World War. Why are we not? I mean, as a British citizen, I'm saying this. Why are we not getting retaliation? I think it's going to happen. I think eventually the countries, when they're strong and this virus is gone, will then retaliate, and there'll be war criminals. Just like it was for Germany, there'll be war criminals.
I think we will see China on trial, because I think what's going to happen is there's going to be there's been no big debate at the moment. Everybody's kicking it in the long grass. I mean, here in the UK, they're talking about having an inquiry this week. They're talking about having an inquiry into all things connected with the virus and, you know, did we clamp down quick enough and all the rest of it. But we need a global debate of where did this come from? You know, I'm really on the side of Trump when he calls it the China virus, because like usual, everybody ignores the fact that it came from China. You know, it's just an unfortunate, you know, disease that happened to come out of this wet market. We shouldn't have been there in the first place anyway. And my thoughts are that we're going to start to get a world inquiry into this, and it's going to cause tension, because China does not like criticism, or the Chinese government. You know, no criticism, zero criticism, certainly from its population, no criticism, you know. And like I said, I've been reading books about a fabulous book about, I've got it here. Where did I put it? I don't know, I put it up there somewhere, but a fabulous book about what happened there in China and how the destruction of what was, I think, such a beautiful culture. Taoism is just like Hinduism, really. It's got all the qualities of holy men and recluses and people in Taoist yoga, and, you know, perfect harmony with all the other religions and all the rest of it. And then along came the Cultural Revolution in China. And I think it is the world's biggest concern, you know, more so than all the worries we even have in the Middle East, which could also flare into God knows what.
jump
Yeah.
in, Greg?
Thank you.
Yes, yes, please. Yep.
For those of you who don't know, I'm a Vedic astrologer, and I'm a part of a research group. And I don't know your feelings. I'm curious to find out. It is our belief that 2024 to 2025, that we're going to see something even greater than what we have right now, that this is just a test of what's to come, because, and it's absolutely like what you said, it's a means to control us. They have learned how to do it, and the worst is yet to come.
Yeah, I agree with you, unfortunately. I think we're going to have, I mean, I haven't said this in many of my predictions, but I think we're going to have very bad times up to about 2025. And my thoughts are just around the end of 2025, we're going to see the reversal of this into a much more positive time. And I don't know how that plays out in astrology, Millie, but it's certainly been in my feelings and Jane's that this is going to be, there's going to be worse things to come. I think we'll see other pandemics actually as well.
What we're calling it is biological warfare.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also possibly all sorts of things we haven't even conceived of yet. Maybe there can be other things done with I don't know. I get the sense you could have things that are biological, but not in the sense of germs and viruses, but something that goes into the very DNA of people. And I'm not saying that, you know, I know a lot of people think, oh, the vaccines have all this, they're a trick. They're not, they're not doing anything like that. But I think there might be the developments, because we're moving so far ahead with everything with science, can give us something fantastic or it can give us something terrible. It's like nuclear power. It's a fantastic potential thing, you know, and it gives us insight into the universe and all sorts of other positive things. And yet it can also destroy us completely. And I think the same is happening with biology, because we live in the age now where you know, in the 60s and 70s and the 50s, 60s and 70s, it was the age of the space exploration and things like that. This is the age of biological, or the next 20, 30 years are probably going to be an age of major biological changes that could bring about maybe longer life and all sorts of things like that. But as a weapon of war, like you say, it could be a very terrible thing. And I think we've got worse to come, unfortunately. We're not going to see the end of it until 2025, when the world starts to see a big spiritual awakening. There will be an awakening that's happening slowly and boiling below the surface now, like people like us talking together and others that join and other channels that are doing this type of thing. There's that undercurrent of spirituality happening. But I think 2025, that's when something big happens, something major. And I'm not talking about, you know, some big Christian thing where everybody raptures and things like that. I'm talking about something where it's an awakening on all the religious levels, not religious, spiritual. It's nothing religious about it. It's
how it should be.
Awakening.
Everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Millie, can I
just
something? Millie, I know a little bit about Vedic astrology. My father practices it, and I swear by it, because I know what it's done for me and my brother. My brother was predicted to go into law when he was studying sports. My brother is now a judge, just to give you an idea. Yeah, I was given a lot of predictions. Can I ask you, what little I understand, why do you feel astrologically, what are the planetary combinations that make you feel this, roughly?
Okay, to start with, true Vedic astrology do not take into account the outer planets, which is Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. However, I do incorporate it, as do many other Vedic astrologers now incorporate it. So Neptune and Uranus are very big, and Pluto as well, because it is as a destruction for rebuilding. And then we have the South Node, Ketu, which again is the planet of destruction, and Mars. So in the combinations, in the houses, the aspects and how they sit, this is what we read and how we come to these conclusions.
My goodness, that's quite a powerful combination.
Yeah,
I'm quite
Doesn't-
curious. Does your brother have Saturn and Mercury in his 9th house?
I don't know. I don't know about him, but I know my
Okay.
chart quite well. I have Venus, Mars in my first, my Lagna, my ascendant is Saturn, Capricorn, and I am in my final period of Ketu Dasha, Mercury, Bud.
Oh, okay.
I'm about to go
Okay.
into Venus, which is my ruling ascendant planet, which is 20 years. My 20 years Dasha is coming for Venus, which
I've been
my
through that.
I'm looking
I've been
forward
through
to it.
and anybody watching this, actually, Millie is very good. She did my astrology
Thank
for
you.
me too, didn't you, Millie? And Jane's, and really good. So
Thank
if
you.
you want to leave a comment, Millie, you can always put your link in there if anybody wants to get.
I appreciate
When
it.
I put this on Patron site, they can come and get a reading with you. I don't mind you
you.
advertising it there. Welcome to.
Thank you.
She's very good. Well, that's interesting. I found that. Any other questions? Any other topics?
Yeah, it was me who put the comments on about the dog. That
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've often felt that my dreams reflect what has happened in the day. But after I put those comments on, I had the weirdest dream that night. It was really weird. I had to take the dog to the vet. And in order to queue up, I had to get into bed. They had a bed in the waiting room, and I had to get into bed and wait. And the vet came through the waiting room in his underpants. It was a weird dream. Now, whether this was sparked off by your book, I got to the bit on sexuality in the book.
Oh God!
Not by that. But,
Yeah, that was the first chapter Jane turned to when I said, "Oh, look, Jane, I've got the new book. Where's the sex bit?"
yeah,
She said, "That's not very. You don't have a big section for that."
I don't think that some of the dreams are sparked off by things that happen in the day.
Yeah.
No,
I think, and you're perhaps there though, Pat. You were getting some thoughts of. I mean, you were asking a question, and then you started getting all sort of dog bed dreams, sort of things coming up. So perhaps your dream, your thoughts were picking up there of the future.
Yeah.
But I think more seriously though, actually, I think we are all of us, aren't we? We're part animal because our bodies are animal, and we're part spirit. Ultimately, we're all spirit, but there is all the behavioral stuff that is like I would think of it as our software that runs the body, and our software that runs our behavior, and then there's our spirit that comes into the body and has to work with all that gear. And I think one of the aspects of dreams is purely as a functional thing, to help us to assimilate all the stuff that's happening in the day. So like dogs will dream about chasing stuff. We would probably dream about work and all the practical things of the day, don't we? And yet there's another level to dreams as well, which is I would call the real me, the real us, which is the spiritual side. And so dreams can sometimes be, like Freud thought the main function of dreams was basically to keep us asleep, to stop us waking up. It's just to keep us asleep. And then mind you, saying that, I thought about that today. Actually, I dreamed of a telephone ringing and it wasn't, and I thought, well, if dreams are to keep me asleep, why did it wake me up? But so dreams have a function in our behavioral software, as it were, but also they have something more, and that's when I think we get little glimpses of the future, because I think in dreams we see other qualities to time.
Well, my mother used to have prophetic dreams. She used to dream about things that were going to happen. But then she did have another type of dream where she met a friend one day and she said, "Oh, I dreamt about you last night." She said, I dreamt your little boy fell down some stairs, and it was in a big department store, and he rolled over and over. But when they picked him up at the bottom, he was fine. And the lady said to her, "That has actually happened."
Uh-huh.
My mother had no idea about it. She thought it was another prophetic dream, but it actually happened. So she was seeing something that had happened, but she didn't know about. Yeah.
I think it is. I think if you start writing your dreams down, you'll start to find that you have more dreams about the future than you ever realized.
Yeah.
I kept a series of dream diaries because I started getting very interested in dreams at one point. I kept them for years. I kept a dream diary and then when I went back, I mean, some of the early entries I was looking at them thinking, my God, that is, this event happened, that event happened, this event. It was telling the story of my life before and I didn't realize that at the time it was a dream about the future. It's only when you look back you realize. So it would kind of been useful to know if it was that I could have done something about things.
Yeah.
It's the materials there, definitely, I think.
Yeah.
Some cultures feel that dreams are really important. I'm a confirmed Hindu. I don't know if I'm a good one, but when I've talked to the nuns and the monks of the Ramakrishna mission, who I'm affiliated with, they've taken intuition and dreams very seriously, very seriously. And I'm amazed because some of them have got medical backgrounds and have given them up, you know, for service to man, so to speak. So they're no idiot whatsoever. I mean, you have to have a very high standard of education. And they've said that for us, intuition is imperative, absolutely imperative, you know. And my father says those people like Craig and Jane who have this skill, my father's a priest, a Vedic priest after retirement, he said those people will realize God a lot quicker than any of us because they have that ability to do that.
I think the realization of things comes through your intuition, doesn't it? And that's why, and dreams are part of our intuitive thinking, you know. Exactly. It's like this shruti, I think they call it in India, don't they? Where you kind of receive knowledge, you know. You just know something. You can go and do an exam on rocket science, and you just know the answers without ever having to study. And I think that dreams also, don't they connect us with like what I would call the universal mind, with the Akashic record, with the collective memory, you know? Jung called it the unconscious collective unconscious, but perhaps there's information there about right back into the depths of the past and right into the far future and into our insight into our life now. And we don't have to kind of think it through with rationality, because rationality is like trying to move a mountain with a teaspoon. You know, this is nuclear stuff. This is stuff that shifts huge amounts, because it's like we have incredible power in that world that we could just tap into. It's not ours. We are just like surfing it, as it were. We're part, you know, we realize it's not something we create and can control. It's just something that's there. And it's just a matter of surrender to it, in a way.
What is the Akashic? What is the Akashic record? I mean, there are people who say they'll do Akashic readings for you or teach you how to access the Akashic record. I mean, what actually is it?
Well, it's an old Sanskrit word, but it's been kind of, as typically happens with all psychic stuff, it's all been grabbed on, and so I'm an Akashic reader. So what does that mean? It means you pick up things in a different way. You pick up things. I mean, perhaps it's a word we should throw out again because it's been misused. But it's like the idea is that everything that's ever happened is kind of in God's memory, you could say. It's like in the memory of God, that everything, and it gives me a very great reassurance that everything that's happened in my life that's been good and painful or wonderful and terrible, it's all been witnessed in a way, because it's part of that Akashic memory. And I feel that when we go to the spirit world, we get a glimpse of it on the way over, as it were, because, you know, like they say, you see your whole life flashing in front of you. Now, I don't think that's necessarily coming from our brain. I think that might be that we've connected, boom, to that whole part of our life that's been there, remembered, every single detail, even the bits I can't remember consciously now, it's there. And that when we go into the higher states of consciousness, or the different states of consciousness that we would experience in the next life, we can, you know, when they say read the book of life, we can, but that's the Akashic record. We read everything. We can understand and read everything that's happened to us. We can re-experience every single moment from the moment of our birth and previous births, all there, retained in God's memory. But what's important is not what's happened, but also where those memories are going to go. And they're also like a karma in a way, because that is also going to dictate what happens in the future. You know, things I've done before will determine what I'm going to do next, you know. And there's still the power of the will, but it's not all written, but it's like the future is also there in the Akashic record in an unformed form until our will is applied to it, and then it becomes structured. So we are creating the memories of God.
My husband had a dream where his whole life was revealed. He saw absolutely everything. He was in hospital at the time, and he told another patient, about this dream and how he'd seen every single aspect of his life. Mm-hmm. Well, it was the following night that he had a stroke, and it robbed him of his speech. So I was only able to know this through the other patient that he told, but he did see that whole life flashing before him, and everything. He saw us getting married, he saw his childhood, and all the events through our life he saw in the dream.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I had it once. I had a car accident once, my fault, and I was going off the edge of not a cliff, but off the edge into a ditch, and everything slowed down for a few moments. It was an amazing feeling, because it was like everything was like on hold, and I was there, I was thinking, oh, so this is it, I'm dead. Oh, that's a shame. There's an awful lot I'd like to do. It was like it was all on hold, and I could see my whole life, but it wasn't like thousands of memories. I just got a feel of the completeness of it, and then there was a feeling that it's not finished. There's more to do. Bam. And then the car hit, so I kind of got a bit of a taste of it personally. Of that. But I can imagine that for the next stage, you probably, before you go into the afterlife, you see even more.
My husband told this person it was like walking along a road, and everything. Mm-hmm. He was sort of passing all the events along the road, and he could look back and see all the past events. But
yeah, so he saw it in a linear sort of way.
He passed away a couple of weeks after that, but he wasn't able to speak again, and yeah. So
incredible, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
The wonders of this life really are amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, when you start to see, beyond the sort of banal world that we live in, and you start thinking about the possibilities of the afterlife, the possibilities of lives we've lived before, the possibilities of the future, the possibilities of other realities even, and even the possibilities of our own perceptions that we don't use in this life, do we? I mean, we live in such a narrow, tiny little, we're looking at the world like a chink in the door. You're looking like we're looking through a keyhole. And yet, when you start to dig and find out, it's just an incredible world out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I pity these people like Richard Dawkins and things, who I did all the arguments with on TV and other skeptics, I think their life is so narrow. It's so shallow. I mean, they talk about how marvelous the world is because it's all science and it's all maths and all the rest of it. But it's even more than that. It's beyond anything we can possibly comprehend.
But science is a religion to them, isn't it?
It is, unfortunately.
Treat it like a religion, science. I studied science at universities, and they really did treat it like a religion. You couldn't say anything that didn't fit in with it, they would throw out. You couldn't argue any other concept other than their,
their model of reality is all that exists.
Yes,
you cannot have another model of reality, and their model of reality takes no account of consciousness. That's just a byproduct of their model of reality.
Yeah.
But sad, but that's the way so many people think, isn't it, nowadays?
Well, it is, yeah.
Yes, okay, right.
I did
Any last thoughts?
Yeah, right. Oh, not really.
Any more thoughts? Any more questions? Well, all right. I think we've kind of come to a bit of a natural conclusion there. I think that's really, really interesting. Talking to about the astrology, that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And some of the thoughts from India, and your dreams and things. I mean, really interesting. So they're quite nice the way these things go, because sometimes you plan a little bit of what you're going to say at the beginning of these things, and then you obviously It goes in all sorts of interesting directions. But I'm just going to say a message at the end now for everybody that's joining us on YouTube itself after watching this afterwards. If you'd like to become a patron, you can come and join us. If you are a patron, you can come and join us for these Zoom sessions. They'll be advertised on the Patron site. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we're here all the time producing all sorts of videos, all about predictions, all about dreams, all about the live show with me and Jane. There's a whole load of stuff you can watch on this channel. So do come and join us again and enjoy sharing with other spiritually minded people. So I'm going to say thanks and I'm going to say bye for now.